Bonum est diffusum sui. Goodness is diffuse of itself. Our God is essential goodness, kindness, a great magnet. He could have theoretically remained alone in his eternity, but by his very nature he cannot stop sharing and doing good. And so we came into being. The invitation, therefore, is to come out of nothing and come into bliss, a free gift. That's our God. But it's not automatic. This week in Belfast, there were two lads in their teens in a car. One was 16, the other 18. They were on a joyride in a stolen car. But the police were aware of it and they came after them. And so the one of 18 who was at the wheel put his foot on the accelerator and pressed as hard as he could. A few minutes later, that whole part of Belfast was shut off to traffic. You can imagine the consequences. The accident happened just outside a Catholic church. The good priest came out, horrified, went immediately for the sacred oils and presumably the Blessed Sacrament, and tried to get to the 18-year-old and presumably also the 16-year-old, who it turns out were Catholics. The police would not let him in. The one of 18 has since gone into the beyond. The one of 16, I believe, is unconscious but not yet dead. A nun was involved in the crossfire, and she is in hospital praying for the others. It occurred to me as I listened to my friend from Belfast telling me this on the phone yesterday, that when it comes to the crunch, this is all that matters. Church politics are one thing, souls are another. Mission, my friends, is not just about creating pumps and giving tractors. It's this business. Getting immortal souls safely home. Only 40 or 50 years ago in Ireland, the chances were that souls would get home safe and sound, because they knew what sin was and how to remedy it. In a mission land, it's somewhat murky. I have told some of you before some of the stories that I would listen to when a student in Rome. Actually also in Dublin, because both times I was living with missionaries. When in Dublin, we would be sharing our table with young missionaries who might be having a sabbatical year of study. And things like this would come out casually at table. One day, the phone rang, and the local police, this is down in Nigeria, called me to the village square. I was to prepare 10 young men for the firing squad. I listened to what they had to say, and I picked up straight away that they were all completely innocent. The police, of course, had to have some kind of message and lesson to give, that one did not get involved with drugs, so it was a bit approximate who might have been responsible. So he turned his eyes, and the din of the machine guns was so strong that it deafened his ears. He turned round and the pillar behind was sawn in two by bullets, and they were no longer in this world. At least, my friends, they had a few minutes to prepare, and maybe got there because they all actually went to confession. I don't know what happened to this man of 18 or his friend of 16, but what I do surmise is that it was not the best way to prepare for that moment which decides every moment. I also know that by now the police in question are deeply sorry that they did not let the priest through. They were just obeying orders to keep everyone out. But my friends, moments of this nature have in their bosom all eternity forevermore, and time in some seconds can go either way. We are called, each one of us, to be God's mouthpiece to people who are right now in front of us in danger of that. Because already, if they die, they are not prepared. So potentially, they too are in that state. Therefore, my friends, I would ask you in God's name, when you are in conversation, be open to the promptings of the Holy Spirit, who might want you right there to speak in his name and be a missionary. When in Italy we had 7 from Africa in formation, and I was novice master, and I would listen to what they were saying and not saying. Every week there would be 1 or 2 or 3 funerals of people of about 40 years of age. And therefore they were aware that the real issue was death. They did not presume that we had a long innings as we do in this part of the world. And they were all by nature somewhat religious, because it's in their culture. The only thing is that they hang on to bits of what they've got, fetishes. And unfortunately, they get into some form of syncretism when it comes to the first evangelization, just to be sure. They hang on to bits. One young man with us, about 19, was telling me how one day, this is all recent history, a girl had wanted to receive the sacraments. Her parents were pagan. She managed to get out of her father permission to be formed and receive Holy Communion at the age of 7. Her father reluctantly agreed, but he asked for a favor. Would you please get hold of that thing which they honor so much? It could be useful. Now, Holy Communion in the hand favors this, doesn't it? So a host came towards her father eventually, and as though it were a fetish, what did he do? He nailed it to the wall for good luck. But that wasn't the end of the story. The Lord felt the nail, and copiously the little host bled so much that the church authorities had to be informed. Another day, the priest in the area had been misbehaving, and you know what that probably meant. But he had a good heart. He was celebrating the sacred mysteries, and with the dignity which they have, he was celebrating it actually externally quite well, but obviously something wasn't right inside. He got to the doxology at the end of the Eucharistic prayer. And being a French-speaking country, therefore very much orientated towards chant and song, he burst into song. Par lui, avec lui, et en lui, à toi. He stopped. In his hands, the host had been transformed. I asked my friend, what form did the flesh take? And without batting an eyelid, he said, C'était de la chair nègre. It was Negro flesh. I thought, that is mission. The Lord identified himself with that poor country. You are equally mine. I could go on. One day, the prior of a monastery founded from Solesmes in France was in church. Solesmes founded Kermoussa in Senegal, and nearby the monks of, I presume, Saint Cécile founded the convent just within distance to be ministered to by the monks in a Muslim area. They had taken on the best of local culture, but also the best of Gregorian as well, in a very interesting blend. Incense every day and great solemnity in African style as well. Able, therefore, to speak to the local people without a word. The church was full of incense. The prior happened to come out of the church and found a local man in tears at the church door. He couldn't speak. Eventually, the prior tried his best with delicacy to find out what was wrong. It wasn't sadness at all. They were tears of great awareness, great and profound consolation, resonance of soul. All he could say was one phrase repeated: Dieu est là, Dieu est là, Dieu est là. God is there, God is there, God is there. The prior on video himself was short and sweet and said, comment valoriser cela? How do one give value to that? Mission is presence. When in school, I was very much influenced by two things at the age of 13. One was a Sunday morning in which our Sunday school teacher took us Baptists to the Eastern Orthodox Church in Cardiff. I had never seen anything of the sort before, but I felt something similar to what that local Muslim felt. This somehow had God in it. This was not our language, even though our language too was strong when they pulled the stops out at the organ and went into harmony in Wales. This was purely divine. Man disappeared and God was in the cloud. Fairly soon afterwards, I went for the first time to the local Catholic church. It was 11 o'clock on the Sunday morning, and I went bristling with prejudices. But the same unexpected feeling came. God is there. It was still the old Mass, because 1968 hadn't changed yet for the High Mass, facing the other way, and I knew that this was serious stuff. There was a battle. Why is the East and the West so different? Eventually, going to a Benedictine place a few years later, it was all sorted out by my spiritual father, who explained. But one thing I became aware of, and it's important on this day of mission, it's this. It's what I heard later, years later, from a close friend of mine who became an Eastern Orthodox. He could not go to the Orthodox Church in Cardiff for one reason. It was so Greek. So he went all the way to Bristol every Sunday to get a cultural version of the East. Now, what I'm getting at is this. I saw, also from traveling, that throughout the world, the only church which can have a semblance of a claim to be universal is the church not based on national identity, but on something of a different order. The Eastern Church has the sacraments and has not changed, but it has a big problem. It's very nationalistic and it's difficult to fit in because the whole culture goes with it, there where you are. Do you see what I'm saying? The Catholic Church, and this is what the problem was always when I was a Protestant, wherever you go, it is home. You have to go from A to B and from B to C when you're on your travels in the Protestant culture to find something corresponding to what you know. And you know that even there, it'll all be what the pastor has to say. Each one is a little pope in practice. Do you see the difference? So, mission, my friends, is serene. We belong to a huge bulldozer which is not just human, but which also depends on us. And I finish where I started. Grace is hugely generous. Souls are hugely fragile. But we, in the name of Christ, each day can save one person from eternal damnation by being a channel of initial goodness, which is the first contact with divine grace.